He called me his rock, then publicly dismissed me as a tax dodge. By morning, he'd learned the true cost of forgetting who really held the keys to our empire. The clinking of champagne glasses sounded like tiny, shattering bells, each one a prelude to the implosion of my life. I stood in the center of our living room, a space I had designed from the bare studs up, wearing a silk gown that cost more than my first car. The room was filled with people, their laughter a low, rumbling tide of self-satisfaction. They were Mark's people, not ours, his. Investors with slicked-back hair, tech bros in designer sneakers, and their wives, who all seemed to have the same polished, vacant smiles. This was supposed to be a celebration. Innovatech, our company, had just landed a massive contract that would propel us into the big leagues. And my husband, Mark, was the man of the hour. I watched him from across the room. He was holding court, a glass of whiskey in one hand, the other gesturing wildly as he told some story. He looked incredible, I had to admit. His suit was tailored to perfection, his smile was blinding, and he radiated an energy that drew everyone in. He was the sun, and they were all just planets orbiting his gravitational pull. It felt like a lifetime ago that I was his entire universe. We met in a dingy college library, both of us fueled by cheap coffee and impossible dreams. He had the brilliant, chaotic mind of a coder, a vision for an app that could revolutionize data management. I had a small inheritance from my grandmother and a degree in business. He saw code. I saw a business plan, a marketing strategy, a path to profitability. So I made him an offer. I would fund his startup, every last penny I had. I would handle the business and the contracts, the hiring, the financials, while he focused on development. But I wasn't going to be a silent partner or a hopeful girlfriend. I was an investor. We drew up the paperwork with a lawyer friend. I would be the majority shareholder, 51%. It was my one non-negotiable term. It protected my investment, my grandmother's legacy. Mark didn't even blink. He laughed, signed the papers, and kissed me. 51 or 100. What's the difference? It's all ours, baby, he'd said. For years it felt that way. We were a team. We built Innovatech from a garage startup into a multi-million-dollar company. We got married, bought this house, and lived the dream we had sketched out on napkins all those years ago. But success, I learned, is a corrosive acid. It slowly ate away at the ours and left behind only his. He started referring to it as my company in interviews. He'd make decisions without consulting me, only telling me about them later as a triumphant afterthought. The man who once saw me as his equal started to see me as an accessory, a supportive wife. He loved the image of us, the powerful tech CEO, and his beautiful, intelligent black wife. It checked a lot of boxes for him in the circles he now traveled in. He just seemed to forget that the intelligent wife was also his boss. Tonight was the culmination of all that slow, painful erosion. He'd asked me to host this party for our most important investors, and a new potential partner, a formidable man named Mr. Harrison. Mark wanted everything to be perfect. And for him, that meant I should be the perfect hostess. I organized the caterers, the valet, the bartender. I made sure every surface gleamed and every glass was full. And as I moved through the crowd, topping up a drink here, offering canapes there, I noticed the way Mark looked at me. It wasn't with pride, it was with expectation. The same expectation he had of the paid staff. The final straw, the one that broke the camel's back and my heart along with it, came when Mr. Harrison cornered me by the fireplace. He was an older, sharper man, and he looked at me with genuine curiosity. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Mark talks about his rock all the time, but he's criminally modest about your role. I did my due diligence. You're not just his rock, you're the foundation, the majority owner, a brilliant business mind in your own right." I felt a blush of pride, a flicker of the woman I used to be before I became just Mark's wife. "Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I believed in the vision from the start." Before I could say more, Mark swooped in, slinging an arm around my shoulder. His smile was wide, but his eyes were cold. "There she is, stealing my thunder again," he laughed, but there was no humor in it. He squeezed my shoulder, a gesture that looked affectionate, but was a clear warning. Mr. Harrison chuckled. Don't be so modest, son. You married up. A woman with a 51% stake in your company is more than a wife. She's a queen. You're a lucky man to have a partner who holds the controlling interest." The air went still. Mark's smile tightened, the muscles in his jaw flexing. He looked from Mr. Harrison's smiling face to my own. I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly replaced by a wave of dismissive arrogance. He let out a loud, booming laugh that was entirely fake. "Oh, that!" he exclaimed, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "You know how these things are. A little creative accounting, some paperwork to keep the tax man happy. She's my biggest supporter, of course, but let's be real." He then leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that was loud enough for everyone in our little circle to hear. "The real work, the vision, that comes from the guy with the actual brains for it." He winked. The men around him chuckled, a sycophantic chorus of agreement. He didn't just downplay my role. He didn't just minimize my contribution. He publicly, in front of the one man we needed to impress, called me a tax dodge, a figurehead, a fraud. He humiliated me, erased me, and reduced my entire identity to a clever trick on a piece of paper. I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at my husband, the man I built a life and an empire with, and I saw a stranger, a cruel, arrogant stranger who had completely and utterly forgotten who held the real power. And in that moment, as the laughter echoed in my ears and my husband preened under the attention, something inside me didn't just break, it calcified. He had forgotten who I was, and I was about to give him the most expensive reminder of his life. I didn't react, not outwardly. Years of sitting in boardrooms, of negotiating with men who tried to talk over me, had taught me how to fashion my face into an unreadable mask. The laughter of Mark's cronies died in their throats as they caught my expression. It wasn't angry, it wasn't hurt. It was blank. A void. Mr. Harrison, however, missed nothing. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, flickered from Mark's puffed-up chest to my still face. I saw a decision being made behind that gaze. He saw a man who would cannibalize his own family for the sake of his ego, and he recognized the liability. Mark, drunk on his own success and the fawning attention, was oblivious. I gave a small, polite nod, a gesture so crisp it was almost a dismissal. "If you'll excuse me, gentlemen," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I believe I need to speak with the caterer about dessert." I turned on my heel, the silk of my gown whispering against the floor. I didn't rush. I walked with the deliberate, unhurried pace of a woman who knows exactly where she is going. Each step was a beat in a war drum, only I could hear. I could feel Mark's eyes on my back, a flicker of annoyance in his gaze that I hadn't stayed to play the part of the chided, forgiving wife. Let him wonder. His time for wondering was about to be cut brutally short. I bypassed the kitchen entirely. I ascended the sweeping staircase, my hand gliding over the cool marble balustrade. Each step up felt like I was reclaiming a piece of my own power. This house, this company, this life. He had made me feel like a guest here for so long. He'd forgotten I wasn't just on the lease, I held the deed. I entered our bedroom and locked the door behind me. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the most satisfying thing I had heard all night. I stood in the darkness for a moment, letting the muffled sounds of the party below fade into a dull, meaningless thrum. The fury came then. It wasn't a hot, screaming rage. It was a cold, silent, and infinitely more dangerous thing. It settled deep in my bones, a core of absolute certainty. He didn't just insult me, he nullified me. In front of a man who held our future in his hands, Mark had painted me as a tax evasion scheme, a puppet whose strings he pulled. All those late nights I'd spent poring over contracts while he slept. Every negotiation I'd won, every fire I'd put out, every sacrifice I'd made, he had gathered it all up and set it on fire just to warm his own ego. The man I loved, the partner I had trusted, was gone. In his place stood a preening, arrogant fool who had fatally miscalculated. He had mistaken my love for weakness, my support for subservience. My mind was suddenly crystal clear. There was no going back. There would be no tearful confrontation, no screaming match. This wasn't a marriage problem anymore. This was a business problem. And I was, first and foremost, a businesswoman. I walked to my closet, pushing aside the designer dresses Mark liked me to wear, and pressed a hidden panel at the back. A small safe clicked open. Inside lay a folder containing one document, our original, ironclad shareholder agreement, the 51% solution. I took it out and laid it on my desk. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and began to type. My fingers flew across the keyboard. First, an email to my personal attorney, a shark named Eleanor Vance, whom I'd kept on a private retainer for years, just in case. The subject, immediate action required. Thus, I attached a scan of the agreement. The body of the email was concise, outlining Mark's gross mismanagement and public misrepresentation of corporate structure, and invoking my rights as majority shareholder under Clause 7B. My instructions were simple: file an emergency injunction, freeze Mark's corporate credit cards and access to company accounts, and schedule an emergency board meeting for 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. The second email was to the board of directors, a simple formal notification of the meeting. The agenda item was listed as a review of executive leadership and corporate governance. I hit send on both emails just as I heard heavy footsteps stumbling up the stairs. The doorknob rattled. "Hey, what's the deal? People are leaving," Mark called through the door, his voice thick with alcohol and irritation. "Harrison left. Didn't even say goodbye properly. What did you say to him?" I stood up and walked to the door, unlocking it with a soft click. He practically fell inside, his face flushed and his tie askew. His eyes were clouded with confusion and anger. "There you are, sulking? Seriously? You need to grow a thicker skin. That's how the game is played, babe." I looked at him, truly looked at him, and felt nothing but a profound, chilling emptiness. The love was gone, burned away by the acid of his words. "The game is over, Mark," I said, my voice even. He blinked, trying to process my tone. "What are you talking about? We just landed the biggest deal of our lives." "No, Mark," I corrected him, stepping aside to reveal the open laptop on my desk, the sent emails still on the screen. "I just landed the biggest deal of my life. You, on the other hand, have a board meeting at 9 a.m. I wouldn't be late. It's about your future, or rather, your lack of one." Mark stared at the laptop screen, his drunken haze struggling to catch up with the stark, black and white finality of the words. "Emergency board meeting, executive leadership, He squinted, trying to focus, then scoffed, a pathetic attempt at his usual bravado. "What is this? Some kind of joke? A power play because your feelings got hurt? Come on, honey, it was just a little locker room talk. You know I didn't mean it." He reached for me, his hand landing on my arm in a placating gesture that felt like a spider crawling on my skin. I pulled away as if I'd been burned. "Take your hands off me," I said, the words as cold and sharp as shards of ice. "And for the record, this is not about my feelings. This is about you publicly devaluing a majority shareholder and creating a catastrophic liability for this company in front of a key investor. This is about gross incompetence. This is business." The word business seemed to sober him up faster than a pot of black coffee. The drunken fog in his eyes cleared, replaced by a dawning, horrified comprehension. He looked from my face to the laptop and back again. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him pale under the expensive party lighting filtering up from downstairs. "Liability? What are you talking about? Harrison loved me. We were hitting it off." "Mr. Harrison is a 70-year-old man who built his empire from the ground up by reading people," I replied, walking over to the bar cart in the corner of our room and pouring myself a glass of water. My hand was perfectly steady. "And tonight, he read you like a cheap novel. He saw a CEO who is so insecure, so blinded by his own ego, that he would throw his most valuable asset under the bus for a cheap laugh. He saw a man who doesn't respect his own foundation. People like Mr. Harrison don't invest in men like that. They see them as a risk, and I happen to agree." He sank onto the edge of our bed, the bed we'd bought together after our first big success. He ran a hand through his perfectly coiffed hair, messing it up for the first time all night. "You can't do this," he whispered, the words ragged. "This is my company, my life's work." The audacity of that statement, after everything, was breathtaking. I let out a short, mirthless laugh. Your life's work? Mark, you wrote the code. That's it. Who incorporated us? Who negotiated our first round of seed funding? Who hired our entire sales team and built the strategy that got us in the room with people like Harrison in the first place? Who found the loophole in the zoning laws that let us get our first office for half the market rate? I took a step closer, my voice dropping, each word a hammer blow. You had a brilliant idea, I'll give you that. But an idea is just a ghost until someone gives it a body, a voice, a place in the world. I did that. I built this company while you were playing with your keyboard. You've just been living in it, and you got so comfortable you forgot who holds the keys. Panic was beginning to set in his eyes, a wild, cornered animal look. This is our life, our marriage. You can't just blow it all up with an email. You blew up our marriage a long time ago, Mark, I said, my voice softening just a fraction, a whisper of the old grief breaking through my icy resolve. It happened every time you called it my company. Every time you made a decision without me. Every time you looked at me like I was just another one of your employees. Tonight was just the eulogy. You humiliated me, not just as your wife, but as your business partner, as your boss, and that is a mistake you can't afford to make. He stood up, his posture shifting from disbelief to belligerence. The board won't let you do this. They respect me. They know I'm the face of Innovatic. They respect the bottom line, I countered smoothly. And my lawyer is at this very moment drafting a summary of your recent executive expenses. The little ski trip to Aspen with your friends that you put on the corporate card. The 5-star hotel suites for conferences you never actually attended. The client dinners at steakhouses with women who are most definitely not our clients. You think they respect a man who uses company funds as his personal piggy bank. You are a liability, Mark. I am the asset. It's a very simple equation. The last of his bravado crumbled. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. He saw it then. He saw that I was not the emotional, wounded wife he could placate with apologies and expensive jewelry. I was the 51% shareholder, and I had just made a calculated business decision to cut a liability from my portfolio. He was staring at the woman who owned him, and he was finally, terrifyingly aware of it. I picked up my phone from the nightstand. You should probably go, I said calmly. I've arranged for a car to take you to a hotel. Your corporate cards have been deactivated, but I've had my assistant leave a personal card for you at the front desk. It should be enough to cover you for a few days. A hotel? He croaked, his voice cracking. You're kicking me out of my own house? That's another thing you seem to have forgotten, I said, looking him dead in the eye. This house was bought with the first major dividend payout from the company, a payout that was proportional to our shares. My 51% paid for more than half of this house. So no, I'm not kicking you out of your house. I'm asking you to leave mine. The board meeting is at 9. Try to get some sleep. You're going to need it. He stumbled out of the room like a man in a trance, leaving the door hanging open. I didn't watch him go. I walked out onto our balcony, the cool night air a balm on my skin, and looked down at the last of the party guests leaving. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Eleanor, my lawyer. Injunction filed and granted. Accounts frozen. See you at 9 a.m. It's a good day for a hostile takeover. I smiled, a real smile for the first time all night. Mark thought he was playing a game. He never realized he was just a pawn on my board. The boardroom at 9 a.m. was a morgue. The air was thick with the sterile chill of air conditioning and unspoken tension. The other 4 board members, 2 venture capitalists who'd invested early on, and 2 industry veterans I'd personally headhunted, sat around the polished mahogany table, their faces grim. They had all received my email, and no one was under any illusions. This wasn't a meeting. It was an execution. I sat at the head of the table, in the chair Mark always insisted was his. In front of me was a single file folder. I was calm, centered, my mind a quiet lake of purpose. The fury from last night had cooled into something far more effective. Resolve. Mark arrived at 9:02 a.m. He looked like he'd been dragged through a hedge backward. His suit was rumpled, his face was puffy, and his eyes were bloodshot and ringed with desperation. He'd clearly spent the night drinking and trying to rally support, only to discover that every call he made went to voicemail. The board members barely acknowledged his arrival, offering only curt, uncomfortable nods. He avoided my gaze, slumping into the chair furthest from me, a deposed king in a kingdom that was never truly his. I didn't waste any time on pleasantries. "Good morning," I began, my voice resonating with an authority he hadn't heard from me in years. "Thank you all for attending on such short notice. We are here today to address a critical failure in executive leadership, which poses an immediate and ongoing threat to the stability and future profitability of Innovatech." Mark flinched as if I'd slapped him. "This is ridiculous," he blurted out, his voice raspy. "This is a personal matter. My wife is overreacting to a private disagreement." I slowly turned my head to look at him, pinning him with a gaze that held no warmth, no history, no love. Was Mr. Harrison a personal matter, Mark? Was publicly misrepresenting our corporate structure to a potential 9-figure investor a private disagreement? Was calling your majority shareholder, the person whose initial investment is the literal bedrock of this company, a tax dodge, a personal matter? I let the questions hang in the air, each one a nail in his professional coffin. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. I had them. I opened the folder. "I have here," I continued, my tone all business, "a preliminary report on Mark's recent use of corporate funds. It includes over $80,000 in unapproved non-business related expenses in the last quarter alone. Lavish personal trips, gifts, undocumented entertainment costs." I slid copies of the expense report down the table. "This, coupled with his reckless behavior last night, demonstrates a pattern of poor judgment and a fundamental misunderstanding of his fiduciary duties to this company and its shareholders." Mark's face went from pale to ashen. "I can explain those," he stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. He had no explanation. We both knew it. "There's no need," I said, cutting him off cleanly. "Because effective immediately, as is my right as majority shareholder, I am calling a vote of no confidence in Mark as CEO." I looked at each board member in turn. "All those in favor of removing Mark from his position as Chief Executive Officer and terminating his employment with Innovatech, please raise your hand." My hand went up first, decisive and unwavering. For a heart-stopping second, there was silence. Then, one by one, the other 4 hands rose. It was unanimous, a clean sweep. Mark made a choked, strangled sound, a mix of a gasp and a sob. He stared at the raised hands, his face a mask of utter devastation. He had believed his own hype. He thought his charm, his vision, was the company's most valuable asset. He never understood that in the end, the only thing that mattered was the numbers on the page and the name on the 51% share certificate. "The motion carries," I announced into the stunned silence. "Mark, your access to the building and all company systems has been revoked. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings." He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading, shimmering with unshed tears. For a fleeting moment I saw the college boy from the library, the dreamer I fell in love with, but it was just a ghost. "Please," he whispered, the sound raw. "Don't do this." "It's already done," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "You did this, Mark. You just forgot you were holding the pen." Security came in, and he went without another word, a broken man who had orchestrated his own downfall. As the door clicked shut behind him, a heavy silence fell over the room. One of the venture capitalists, a man named Chen, finally cleared his throat. "Well," he said, looking at me with a newfound respect, "that was efficient. So, what's the plan for a new CEO?" I closed the folder in front of me and placed my hands flat on the table, leaning forward slightly. I looked around the room, meeting each of their gazes, letting them see the power and the certainty that had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. "You're looking at her," I said. "Effective immediately, I will be assuming the role of acting CEO. My first order of business will be to personally call Mr. Harrison, apologize for the unprofessionalism of our former CEO, and assure him that Innovatech is now under stable, competent leadership. My second will be a full audit. We're cleaning house. Any questions? There were no questions, only slow, dawning smiles of approval. For the first time, I wasn't Mark's wife, his rock, or his silent partner. I was the woman who owned 51% of the company, and I was finally sitting in my chair, driving home that evening, not to our house, but to my house. I didn't feel triumph or even sadness. I felt quiet. I felt like myself again. He had tried to humiliate me, to reduce me to nothing, but he forgot one crucial thing. I wasn't just his wife. I was the architect of his entire world, and he had just handed me the blueprints to rebuild it however I saw fit, and I was just getting started.